Carl Barks Fan Club presents its European tour, honoring the artists, writers, editors, and publishers of Disney comic books in Europe who continue the Carl Barks style of comic art and storytelling. Awards of recognition, signed by Roy Disney, were presented to the many artists all over Europe who follow in the footsteps of the good duck artist, the legendary Carl Barks. Episode 5, Sanoma Magazines in Helsinki, Finland. Helsinki, Finland, home of Sanoma Magazines, publishers of the Disney Ducks in Finland. Donald and Scrooge appear monthly in the comic book series Aku Ankka, which is Finnish for Donald Duck. We arrive at Sanoma Magazines and are greeted by Riku Perala, head of the comics editorial department. Our host during our visit was Jukka Heiskanen, editor-in-chief of Aku Ankka comic books. Jukka and Riku introduce us to Markku Kuvikas, editor emeritus of Aku Ankka comic books. Markku is a longtime Barks scholar and is credited with being one of the first to learn the identity of the good artist, Carl Barks. Markku gave each of us a bookplate made from a drawing Carl drew in 1994 of Markku working in his library. Carl also presented to Sanoma a drawing of the nephews, saluting the country of Finland. Markku shares his recollection of Carl Barks's visit to Finland in 1994.
How come Donald Duck is so popular? Do you know why?
Well, I don't know. I guess you'd be able to answer that better than I can. He's not so popular in the United States as he is here. The kids over there don't know how to read.
Oh, Carl.
Markku showed us a Sanoma's Book of Honor, signed by such notable guests as Carl Barks. Following our tour of Sanoma, we decided to visit some local comic shops and antique stores. We arrived at this shop just in time to be let in by the owner, who shared an article written about his shop when Carl Barks visited in 1994. That evening, we located an antique store called Pop Antique. It was closed, so we had to come back the next day. We met the owner, who was a very nice lady. A photo of her and Carl Barks hung in a prominent spot on the wall in her shop. That evening, the staff at Aku Ankka held a banquet in our honor. The menu drew from several Barks-inspired dishes, such as square poached eggs from the story Lost in the Andes. After the meal, fan club president Ed Bergen made several presentations to the artists, writers, and editors at Aku Ankka who have made a significant contribution to the continuing legacy of Carl Barks. Receiving awards were, among others, Riku Perala, head of comics at Sanoma; Jukka Heiskanen, editor-in-chief of Aku Ankka; Markku Kuvikas, editor emeritus of the Disney comics; Juhani Talveinen, comics editor; and Marco Lepala, Barks scholar and art collector. It was a gala event. A good time was had by all. The next day, Jukka took us to meet an Aku Ankka artist who was unable to attend the banquet. Kari Korhonen was hard at work in his studio drawing the line art for the next issue of Aku Ankka. Kari relates how he became interested in comic art.
I started in '93, just doing scripts for other people first, and little story sketches. Then got into drawing a couple of years after that.
Carrie remembers when Carl Barks visited Finland in 1994.
Yeah.
That was a huge success.
Yeah.
There were people under the town hall, and they waved from the balcony, and that was very nice. But you can't really do that with writing. Like Carl once said, that writers are more bold than artists.
We end our visit with the presentation of the Goose-Egg Nugget Award to Carey for his contribution to the Carl Barks legacy. Back at our hotel, Jukka bids us a fond farewell as we prepare to leave Finland for our next destination. We interviewed Carl Barks at his studio in Grants Pass, Oregon in 1993. Carl recalls the first drawing that he sold and his work with the Calgary Eye Opener in 1929.
Recently, it was not a drawing of anything more than the sleeve of a soldier's coat that I did for a poster. This was right after World War I had ended, and all the soldiers and sailors were being discharged, and there was a particular chevron that was given to them when they had been discharged that they could put on their sleeve. I forget whether it was down here or up here, but anyway, this chevron was put on in a certain way to identify that they could still wear that uniform and wear that chevron to show that they were a discharged soldier and didn't no longer have to salute the officers when they met them. Always trying to learn how to draw and studying the way drawings were always related to an idea of some kind. And I was working at that time in the railroad car shops on a riveting gang, and I wanted to get away from that terribly hard work very much. And I got to looking at these joke magazines and decided that perhaps I could illustrate something that I could sell to a joke magazine. So I tried it, and I sold a little drawing. They didn't use the joke that went with the drawing, but they printed the drawing. In 1929, I think I sold the first drawing. In 1931, they offered me a job to go back there and work.
Soon after this interview, the Disney Studios took Carl on a tour of the European publishers who had the Disney license. Everywhere Carl went, he was pressed by an adoring public who wanted to meet the man who had brought them such joy through his comic book stories. At one reception in particular, Carl received applause that went on for long minutes, a fitting tribute for a man known only as the good artist.
Pleased to have you, very honored indeed, because we have had many famous guests in the bookstore. All sorts of artists and authors and presidents and kings and queens.
And also comic book king.
Oh, yes.
Well, Mr. Barks, how does it make you feel when you realize that millions of children around the world have learned how to read from comics you drew and wrote? How does it make you feel?
Well, it makes me feel very good. I worked hard on my dialogue to make it simple. I kept my dialogue right to the point.
Thank you for watching episode 5 of the Carl Barks Fan Club European Tour. Watch for episode 6, Egmont Publishing in Oslo, Norway.